anything.
Streaming. The stream is starting. And I'm gonna just... Every time I do this, I get so frazzled. So I'm gonna post a link on my Twitter really fast. Oh my goodness. Oh. Okay. Okay. Well, as people are filing in, let me just set up one more thing. So I have to post this. Oh my gosh. Oh, I did this wrong. How do I just see my Patreon? Okay. There we go. No. Okay. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to post a link to the stream, which I do that by going to this, and then I go to share, and then I copy this, and then I go back to Twitter, and then I say that we're having book club. Oh wait, I already did the post. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I want to say that we're all set up to go. I don't know why. I've done this so many times, and every time I'm just like, wait, is that everything that I need to do? Oh, I have inverted color, so I'll take that off. I'll do light. Okay, that's a bit better. Okay, cool. So, hey, I don't know if we have all met each other. So let's just do some quick introductions. If people have like a YouTube channel, they can promote their YouTube channel, and if people want to just say their pronouns as well. If they want to say like a little bit about something about themselves really briefly, that's cool too. But you all know me. I'm Lua. I have the YouTube channel Professor Flowers, and I make YouTube videos and stuff. Yeah, Clark, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I'm Clark. I'm Lua's IRL friend, and I'm just, I don't do any YouTube or anything significant on social media at the moment. Maybe someday in the future, but just a leftist person, I guess. I use they them pronouns. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here, I guess.
Also, I totally forgot to say my pronouns. My pronouns are he, him, or she, her.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Clark. Corin, would you like to go?
All right. I'm Corin or Corey, either's fine. He, him pronouns. I'm a trans man. I'm also multiply disabled, and I more or less worship bugs.
Nice. Do you want to go, Silver Spook?
Sure. Hey everybody, I'm Silver Spook, and have a YouTube channel. I think it's just called Silver Spook Games, and yeah, I'm a native Hawaiian activist and indie game developer, and yeah, happy to be here.
Really glad to have you here. Spudboy, would you like to go?
Yeah, my name's Kyle. Is he, him pronouns. Nothing really particular to say about myself. I'm happy to be part of this. I enjoyed the reading, and I'm excited to see what everyone else thought about it too.
Awesome. And then, sorry, I forgot. Silver Spook and Kyle, can you say your pronouns really fast?
It's he, him, or they, them for me, yeah.
Yeah, he, him.
Awesome, thanks. Jeremy, would you like to go?
Yeah, what up, everybody? I'm Jeremy. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I am in Houston. I'm a teacher, and I'm actually going to have to uh, go in a little bit. I'm not exactly sure how long, but I'm happy to be here. I have this anarchist book fair that I'm going to be going to, so I'm excited to drop into that afterwards.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, Nikki, would you like to go?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Nikki. I use she, her pronouns. I'm what I call a full spectrum abolitionist, so everything from prisons, institutions, anything that upholds systemic oppression. So looking forward to the discussion today.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks, everyone. I'm so glad you're all here. For anyone who's watching, this is just a book club where we're all reading this book together and then learning about it as we go. So it's not going to be something more like a video essay where it's more put together and where someone's maybe teaching something. We're all kind of learning about it in real time, and you can feel free to join us. So yeah, with that, let's just dive in, especially since Jeremy has to get going a little bit early. Hopefully OBS won't crash, because last time it did. I have a new computer, which is really great, but I'm still figuring out the bugs of OBS. So hopefully it won't crash this time. But yeah, let's just dive in. I will, let's see, share my screen so anyone here can look at my notes if they would like to. But basically, like, I end up taking notes, and then we kind of like use that as a springboard to talk. So let's take a look at chapter 1. So for my notes, I have dehumanization is not a given destiny, but a result of an unjust order that engenders violence to the oppressors and dehumanizes the oppressed. I thought that was really important because it's just, I think it's easy to fall into doomerism, to feel like there's no hope, but just understanding that being dehumanized is specifically a violence, and if it's not a destiny, that means that we can fight against it. Yeah, I guess, does anyone have any thoughts maybe on that note or want to add anything? Okay, cool. Well, I'll just keep going. So the next note that I have is the oppressed must not turn into oppressors of the oppressors when seeking their humanity, but restore the humanity of both the oppressed and the oppressors. And it says, this then is the great humanistic and historical task of the oppressed, to liberate themselves and their oppressors as well. The oppressors who oppress, exploit, and rape by virtue of their power cannot find in this power the strength to liberate either the oppressed or themselves. Yeah, sorry, I'm just pausing because I realized that I had OBS on the notes the whole time when we were doing introductions, so I feel really bad. But maybe really fast, just for anyone who's watching. Oh, I guess you can't see where I'm pointing. Okay, never mind. We'll just keep going. I'm sorry that I'm just so awkward around this stuff. Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on that? Because I thought that was really interesting, just about the way that like oppressed people can kind of join the oppressor class. I thought that was really interesting. Like for me, like I immediately thought of, I thought of like people trying to assimilate into like the system, and then using that system to like beat down other people who are facing the same oppression that either you just faced or are still facing. But I was curious if anyone had any thoughts on that.
It certainly bring a lot of people to mind for me. It brings to mind like the gay people that the moment they got the right to marriage, stopped giving any concern whatsoever for like trans struggles and other queer struggles. And it also brought to mind a lot of white feminists in the way they'll shove literally anyone else under the bus, trying to get to the same position in society as the typical white man in the same social growth.
Yeah, I just watched this video on TERFs, and it was like a really good video. It was like Jesse Gender talking about like, I thought that like TERFs like just like had like really bad ideas and stuff, but like just kind of going into like white feminism and like the way that it only like upholds like one idea of femininity, and that's white femininity, and how that affects trans people and also people of color. And it was just a really good video, breaking all that down. But yeah, those people also like very much come to mind for me as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out the ways that like sort of like entrenched or internalized ideas of like the fundamentality, or like that like hierarchies are innate, is something even people who see themselves maybe as radical, like if you don't have a more like a holistic idea of liberation, it is kind of it's like a counteracting thing. And the way that like Freire points out that like in oppression, it dehumanizes not only the oppressed but the oppressor as well.
Yeah, something that I really loved in this chapter is, let's see, like when he talks about freedom. Maybe we'll have to get to it. But yeah, I just like just the idea that like people, like if you're living in a state where you're oppressing people, that's, oh my gosh, wait, it's this one. I remember which one I'm thinking of. So let me share. Let's see, go to OBS notes. This quote, which is on 58. It's about like the idea of like having. So I'm going to read the whole thing. It's a little long. But he says, in their unrestrained eagerness to possess, the oppressors develop the conviction that it is possible for them to transform everything into objects of their purchasing power, hence their strictly materialistic concept of existence. Money is the measure of all things, and profit the primary goal. For the oppressors, what is worthwhile is to have more, always more, even at the cost of the oppressed having less or having nothing. For them, to be is to have, and to be the class of the haves. As beneficiaries of a situation of oppression, the oppressors cannot perceive that if having is a condition of being, it is a necessary condition for all women and men. This is why their generosity is false. Humanity is a thing, and they possess it as an exclusive right, as inherited property. To the oppressor, consciousness, the humanization of others, of the people, appears not as the pursuit of full humanity, but as subversion. The oppressors do not perceive their monopoly on having more as a privilege which dehumanizes others and themselves. They cannot see that in the egoistic pursuit of having as a possessing class. They suffocate in their own possessions and no longer are. They merely have. And I just thought that was like so sad. I think just like growing, like for me, like my family kind of like fell down a class while I was growing up. They were like somewhat wealthy, and then they kind of became, I don't know, like I guess a little bit more working class. It's kind of hard to say. I think I like grew up like with a single mom, and just like, I don't know, but it's just and when I look back into like when my family was wealthy, like I actually feel really disturbed, because I just remember they would just like buy stuff that they didn't want or didn't need, and that always disturbed me, because our house like always had so much stuff, and it was like stuff they would like spend their time buying stuff that they didn't want or didn't need, and just like as an activity, and it just felt so vapid to me. And yeah, I don't know. I just like have these like intense memories of like going shopping with my mom or going shopping with my grandma, and just kind of doing an activity that didn't necessarily connect us more, but they were just getting stuff. And it always just like stuck with me and unsettled me with me. So like just when I read that quote about like the way that like people just want to have things, and the goal is to have, and that's kind of like what all this is just like moving towards, just to have as much stuff as possible. It just made me really sad, just like what a vapid way to live and structure life around, just around having as much stuff as possible, or like having the power to control people. It's like, that's really oppressive for anyone, really. Like, that's, I mean, like, even the oppressed class, it's not something that sounds very alluring or sounds like a life that you would want to live. Yeah, not sure if anyone has any thoughts on that or anything.
Yeah, I think that's important to bring up, because it's something that's so like fundamental to our culture, or the culture of the, you know, I guess the West, for want of a better term, is that like the link between commodification and identity, and like commodification of identity, even like that we like see ourselves and the way we like realize ourselves through consumption.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, when we read Braiding Sweetgrass, which a couple books ago, like, it reminded me of like the line before the quote I just read said, "The earth, property, production, the creations of people, people themselves, time, everything is reduced to the status of object at its disposal." And it made me think of Braiding Sweetgrass, where like, she talks about like how in the Potawatomi language, like she talks about how like in English, like, we say the bay and it's an object, but in Potawatomi it's more like baying, like the bay is baying, like all these things that we would consider nouns are actually verbs in that language. And so yeah, just like, I guess if everything's alive, it's probably harder to objectify it, because you're like, oh, it's like doing, you know, it has its own life that is worthy of living. And so it's probably harder to turn those things into objects. And I just think about, like, in English, like, not that it has to inherently be this way, but it's like a lot easier to be like, well, that's an object. Or like, even the way that like we just kind of like tend to think of things as like objects that we can use, rather than everything deserving like its own autonomy and being a part of a complex system. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeremy. Yeah, sorry. All right.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to add to that was that the part before about, like, you know, the oppressors or the oppressed needing to teach the oppressors, like, basically how to not be oppressive anymore. It made me, like, you know, it's true, but it also made me feel a certain type of way, as just like it kind of gives people an out of like, you know, well, I don't really have any choice but to act this way, right? And I feel like, you know, a lot of people would be like, you ask the average, you know, normie, and they're like, oh, I'm not an oppressor. Like, I might be part of a privileged class, but like, I'm not like actively out here trying to make my life all wealth centered. And like the other thing that it made me think about is that, like, you know, I don't typically think of myself as an oppressor, but like, you know, I am part of like, I'm a man, I'm able-bodied, and just in thinking about, like, you know, how I relate to my family and the things that, like, you know, bring up to me that, like, oppressed people kind of have to teach oppressors how not to be oppressive, is that, like, it's not just a matter of accumulating things, it's like controlling anything that you can, like, to the point of like ideas that, like, you know, people will commonly say, oh, well, you know, you can only be a man or a woman, and that, like, that's the thing that they hold on to. That's the thing that we hold on to, that, like, I was raised to hold on to, is that, like, even if you're not out here trying to accumulate anything, you're trying to hold on to whatever it is that you can, instead of like actually like allowing or like getting yourself in a mind frame of liberatory practices.
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of that he talks about like prescription. Where is it? Well, basically, he just is saying that, like, the oppressor class prescribes their ideology, their consciousness, and then the oppressed have to like see themselves through that consciousness. I guess it sounds like dual consciousness as I'm saying it out loud, but just whatever they prescribe is like how oppressed people like have to see themselves. And I guess that in itself is just like a huge part of the oppression. There's like multiple layers of it. Like, like as you were saying, like, people aren't trying to intentionally do that, but just like this dominant worldview that is one opinion that we all have to just look at ourselves through. I think, yeah, it's just very oppressive in itself.
One of the thoughts that has come up for me, I think of a lot of things through the lens of policing and abolition or like institutional harms, is even when you take out like the police or the oppressors in this situation, you still have the mentalities that you have to dismantle in your own brain, right? So the idea, and this is a kind of aggressive language, but like killing the cop in your mind, it is a mindset that you have to dismantle. And each of us has that process go a little bit differently because our relationship with policing or people of power is different. And so understanding how we've adopted some of those norms that they are upholding and stopping them in our own brain so that we're not bringing those into our relationships, into our families, into our communities, and just policing people or being an oppressor in a way that, we don't have the badge or the label, but we still enact on those values. And so it's yeah, and I really liked, thank you, Jeremy, for bringing up the points that you did. I really liked what you had to say.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, I think there's like these ways where I'm like there's like these ways that I have like this like uptightness where I'm like, oh, like things should be this way. And I think it's like I think I used to be Christian. I think also just like there's like an uptightness around white people, like growing up with white people around like this idea of should, not to say that it has to be exclusive to white people, but I do think like a lot of white people, like it's like an aspect of whiteness. Like you should be this way. Like you have to conform to these things. And if you don't, you're wrong or doing something. It's like it's a moral issue. I think there's like a lot of things that I've realized like aren't really moral issues. And so like, I don't know, like recognizing like if people hurt me, that doesn't necessarily also mean that they did something wrong. And so like, I don't know. I've been trying to like give space. Like, I guess for me, like something that I've been trying to kind of like deconstruct more is just like giving people more space to be human and not kind of like operate in a binary of like should and should nots, for example. And like that's kind of something of like that I would like kind of consider like I think people might think this is a stretch, but like I kind of consider that mentality like a bit white supremacist of just like things need to be a certain way, things should be like this, and if you don't do that, then you're just morally wrong. And I think there's definitely things like that where it's like it's really messed up and it's hurting people, but there's like a lot of things that I think I'll get like really uptight and anxious about, be like, well, it should be this way and it doesn't need to be, and like trying to not inflict it on people. But for me, that's just something that I've been trying to deconstruct more. Clark, I think you were gonna say oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say
yes.
you go ahead. I said it.
I was actually just gonna say that thought had left in my mind the conversation down. It's okay.
My point was to what Lou was saying. It brings to mind from the text. He was talking about how like education and liberatory education is like or for it to be liberatory has to be a dialogue. Like it's not like a top down, like I as the educator am the holder of knowledge and I'm telling you how to be. It's like, as entering into education, we are in a dialogue and are, can both learn from each other, and that's also like a continuous, like perpetual process. I think that's kind of like a fundamental thesis of this book, or it seems to be.
Well, I thought something was interesting because he did say that eventually, like if he like described the stages, and then he was like, there's a certain stage where like freedom is permanent, and I thought that was interesting because I think it would be like a little bit like a constant like checking in with people, but yeah, there's some interesting stuff there. Yeah, I guess I feel like I've talked a lot, but like, does anyone? Maybe I should ask everyone: is there anything that anyone want to really get to?
That's the one part that I had a lot of trouble with, is the part where it talks about needing to trust the people to learn, which is something that is just very difficult for me to do in general at this point, especially as a disabled person and witnessing the entire pandemic and it continuing to go on, and feeling like people aren't willing to listen to things, aren't willing to deconstruct the ideas they have. It makes it difficult to trust people to learn.
Like, just trust people in general to learn?
Yeah. Like, I've lost a lot of faith in other people over the last few years because people aren't willing to do even very, very basic steps to protect my friends and to protect me, and it's very, very frustrating.
Yeah, like, I guess, could you say, like, what part you're referring to about, like, trusting people to learn? Because I think, yeah, do you, like, have, like, a quote?
I was using the audio, so I don't think it can, like, pull up the exact version.
Mm-hmm. Because, like, the sense that I get is that, I think he's, like, really critical of, like, the oppressors and, like, how the oppressors, like, need to work in solidarity with the oppressed, but in a way that is working with them and not telling them what to do or thinking that they need to like lead that. I don't get the sense of just like, oh, is it about like the part where he talks about like comradeship and how like in like you kind of realize that things are messed up and things need to change, but things can't really change unless other people start to see that too and you work together. Is it that part?
Yeah, it's that part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I have like a similar like because like for me, like I'm thinking about like white people, and obviously I'm thinking of like my situation that I was in, where people really sucked. And it was just like, oh, this is not like, we're not gonna have solidarity with these people where they're at now. And it's like disturbing because it's like, you know, people will say like the right lingo about like anti-racism and stuff like that, but just realizing how far away people are from solidarity. And yeah, like I'm not sure either. Like I think that's why I like to have things like book club, because I feel like I meet people where I'm like, I feel like good about like the people here, and like we're talking about these things and we can like meet as a community, and I think that's really important. But in general, it's like I don't know what to do. And I think honestly, like the main thing, I think what I'm like actually most concerned about is like maybe community building. Like I think build like when he talks about like, oh my gosh, like I wish I don't, Tovia, I don't know if you can pull this up, but like the original oh, sorry, let me make sure this is streaming. Translation for...
Yeah, I'll look for it right now.
Okay, I'll try to summarize it, but it's like the original translation was like saying like that the oppressed like need to see themselves, or the oppressor needs to see themselves in the oppressed, and like that's what solidarity is, like in seeing themselves in them and then working with them. And the English translation was like, oh, like you just need to stand in like solidarity with them, and it was like a lot more tame. But I think it's just like, to me, like I just think about like empathy and like the ability to like see yourself in each other. And I think when you do that, like people care on a personal level. And I think that's like what we have to get to, is like being able to care about these issues on a personal level and not just be like, oh, that's like this awful issue happening over there, but like personally care about it. And I think if we can do that, I think we can have solidarity and work together. But I think a lot of people are not really thinking in those terms, and that's really concerning.
Yeah, I got the sense from the chapter. I don't know if he ever said it explicitly, but there was like some hints that like in the process of liberation there needs to be structures, I guess, like, you know, imposed against the oppressor to keep them from oppressing. That it kind of goes into it when he talks about how like the oppressor will see that as oppressive, but it's not, because like the act of oppression is it becomes so normalized, like seeing yourself as above people, that I guess, like, you know, equality feels like oppression. And I think that that's an important part. Like, yeah, there is, like, you know, solidarity and working together, that's an important part of it, but it seems like he's making the argument, and I kind of agree, that there needs to be like a implemented structurally, like things that, you know, like keep people from oppressing people, whether it's like you know, ideologically, economically, whatever. I don't know if that completely made sense, but
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like, it's just really hard. Like, people are just so used to being an oppressive class. It's hard to, like, there needs to be like stuff in place to prevent that from happening. But yeah, I loved that quote, that it was like saying like pretty much like anything, like, I was just like brutal. It was like, oh my gosh, let me see if I can find it. It was like, oh gosh, it was just saying that like anything that's just like slightly, oh gosh, I said it on my Twitter, but it was like anything that's like just doesn't uphold their comfort is seen as oppression. And I just thought that was just so so true.
yeah, and he, like, I also like, and it ties into that when he's talking about like how rebellion against oppression, as it can be seen as violence, and it sometimes can manifest itself violently, it like also can bring about love, or like an act of love, like in, you know, that it you know, it restores humanity in the oppressor as well as the oppressed by you know, limiting that ability, or eradicating that ability of one class to oppress another.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me a lot of just like, I don't know, like the stuff that it's talking about, just like it just ending oppression, being transformative, feels like really familiar. Feels like, I don't know, like it almost sounds like, I don't want to like oversimplify it or make it sound cheesy, but just like that feeling of like, I don't know, I feel like I see this in like movies and TV shows all the time, where like they'll kind of like be the bad guy and you like hate that character and you're like, wow, what a piece of shit, like this person's mean and fucking things up, and then they kind of like have like this change of heart where they kind of like join the good guys, but it's just kind of like this change of heart where they realize like, oh, like I've been really oppressive and I want to work with you as opposed to oppressing you. And it's like a lot of times in TV shows, it's like this really beautiful transformative moment where there's like a lot of character development, where someone like, you know, where both of these people are like able to work together. And I don't know, I'm a sucker for that stuff, but I think it's like really beautiful. And I think it's really, like, a lot of people like it because I think a lot of humans recognize that's really beautiful. Like, why are we fighting and oppressing each other and like preventing each other from expressing ourselves? Like, why not work together. And if we can come to realize that, I think that is truly freedom. But getting there is just kind of like, yeah, that's, I'm not sure how, but I guess what I'm getting at is I really like the element of like transformation of like working towards liberation, and how that is a transformative process. It's a lot. I mean, he even quotes The Wretched of the Earth, which talks about that quite a bit. Yo, yo, yo!
Hey.
Hey.
Showing up late. Hope I didn't miss much.
Oh, we're just chatting. Yeah, does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? I might just start going through my notes just to make sure we covered everything.
I have that quote. I put it in the text chat.
Oh, cool.
Y'all were talking about that earlier. I think that's actually kind of one of my, that quote is kind of one of my big takeaways from this book, honestly. It was like a pretty impactful thing, like really just the difference. And it's funny because it's like in the context of it being mistranslated, the difference between just like having compassion and actually seeing yourself in somebody. Yeah, that's just been sitting with me since like a week ago whenever y'all were talking about that. So
yeah,
I've been thinking a lot about that, like reflecting. I mean, I think also like growing up with like the way that poverty was like in my life growing up, and like I can see myself in that in a way because I've been there, but it also like I think that experience is like, oh, well, I can extrapolate that and sort of like make the effort to see myself beyond things that I maybe haven't experienced. See myself in these, as being like in solidarity or as being in with people and part of communities that maybe have experienced things that I haven't. So
yeah, I feel like
that juxtaposition is really interesting. Yeah, go ahead. No, you're good.
I was just gonna say, like, I feel like there's like all these like little ways where like even though I don't have the experiences of other people, that I'm just like, oh, like that feels familiar. Like I didn't grow up poor, but I just like when I hear about like the way that rich people are like, oh, like they're poor because they want to be, and like they need to like we can help them, but like ultimately like it's they're just not good at making decisions or something is like how it's framed. And like that to me like feels really familiar as a Black person, even though like I didn't grow up poor, but just like hearing just like the way that people will be like, oh well, Black people are in these fucked situations because they just suck, they just couldn't do it. And it's just so infantilizing and so frustrating. And like there's just like all these like little ways where it's like, even though I don't have this experience of growing up poor, or I don't have like all these like sets of experience with having to deal with ableism, there's like all these ways where I'm like, but that feels really familiar, that looks like a really similar power structure. And I personally hate it because I don't think anyone should have to go through those kinds of things ever again. And I think like just like sometimes like I'll talk about like racism on my YouTube channel, and I'll like mention that like, yeah, like I'll just mention like other races that experience similar things because we're literally all living under white supremacy. And sometimes people will be like, oh, like you're getting like Black people and other people of color mixed up, and like you should just focus on Black people. And I get so mad because I'm like, well, no, other people are also experiencing this too. And it's actually uncanny like how similar this functions because we're all living under white supremacy. And it honestly makes me feel connected to other people of color when you realize that we're going through pretty much the same struggle. There's differences in our history for sure, and there's differences in how things can function at times, but we're living under the same oppressors. And so there's a lot of parallels, and it makes me feel connected to people. And so that feeling of connection is, I think, something to hold on to. and also it can be startling because as Corin, you're saying, like a lot of people suck and a lot of people kind of can talk the talk, but when it comes down to it, like they're not really there for you. And I think that's a lot of people, unfortunately. But then there's also like people where they are, and it's really beautiful and profound when people can show up for each other. Like it's like extremely profound. So I think just like holding on to that is important. Oh, I wanted to read the thing that, so this is what is a more direct translation of it's this line that was like in the intro of the book. But this is a more direct translation from Portuguese. So it says, to the tattered of the world and to those who discover themselves in them, thus by discovering themselves, suffer with them, but above all, fight with them. And the English version of that was just like really just bleh. It was just like, oh, like find solidarity and just, I don't know, which is not bad, but just like the way it was worded, like suffer with them and find and fight with them. It's like, I don't know. I just have a feeling that's, I've kind of just like always thought, I'm like, like I feel like we need more than just talking about these ideas theoretically. We need to like suffer with people, which I think is like kind of healthy. Like I've been learning a lot about like emotional boundaries, and like I don't think it's always good to like feel the pain that other people are feeling, because then you just end up feeling everything and it's not necessarily healthy. But I do think there's like an aspect of like, I do think there is like a healthy amount of times to suffer with people and like feel what they're feeling and connect to it in a way where this isn't just their problem, it's your problem too now, because you're personally invested. Yeah, does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's real. I'm like kind of sad I'm showing up late because there's even like I read this book 10 years ago and it was really formative, and even coming back to it, it's like it feels very, I don't want to say cathartic, but like there's an element that's like fucking yeah, dude, like how did I forget? Or like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense, but also like it feels for present, because like as like new generations of struggles form and like come together and dissipate, I'm seeing like, I don't want to say parallels, but I'm seeing interesting elements that are new, but like is being discussed. I don't know, back. So anyways, I'm not being great right now discussing my ideas, but like I feel a little too abstract. But to kind of hone in, like yeah, with the sharing of people's pain and stuff like that, like it's the discussion of boundaries is really important too, because sometimes even going into sharing people's pain, because you don't have like the full picture of what it's like to suffer through someone's like agony, you might come up with very different conclusions than someone who's been dealing with it all their lives. Mm-hmm. So it's not even just healthy boundaries for yourself, that you might not you might not overstep, because that's what people do when they first experience very traumatic things that people have been experiencing all their lives. They tend to overcorrect. They tend to overextend. They tend to like, oh my God, what do you mean? This is insane. How can you? And it's just like, dude, this happens every day here. Sorry, like, you know, we're a little desensitized to that now. You're actually making this issue worse than it actually should be. Sorry. Can you just take a step back and like refer to the people that have been dealing with this all their lives, but also like be in solidarity there. People can still be in solidarity, even though that initial shock of those like pains and those things like can put them in a compromising situation for themselves, frankly speaking, but also for others if they don't know how to deal with it well. Yeah. And that's where like are a major thing, and just a lot of like self exploration, for lack of better words. But on another, I'm not sure if like one of them that's like the major, as reading this again, two things that are like popping up for me are like, in engaging with struggle, you're innately the dance that you play with dehumanization. I don't know if y'all have already talked about that, but like that part is really not fucking with me, but it's like hitting me really hard. Is the dance in relation to power and claiming power, reclaiming power, and or like assessing whether that's what you want to do. But innately within that struggle, there is elements of loss of humanity that we have to like assess, like moving forward, right? Like, you mentioning earlier with like people of color, like, one group of people of color being like, nah, those people of color aren't with us, or like, fuck them, they'd never know. It's interesting because like, even within, I mean, there's elements of dehumanization there that I mean, I understand that's like, no one could ever, like an Asian person can never understand like my personal struggle completely, but there's like ways we can connect, at least I believe so. But it's even within like a specific color, like, even amongst like black people or even Asians, like, there's a major difference between homeland Chinese people and someone born in an Asian person born in San Francisco, like a Chinese person. There's a major difference between an American, Black American, and African people. And just because you have the same skin color doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the same ways of addressing life and dealing with oppression. So it's kind of sad that like people are still kind of stuck on the tonality, like the skin tone elements, which like, yes, anti-blackness is real, colorism is real, but it just makes me sad. But I think there's just elements of dehumanization there, elements of like disenfranchising, even within one's own like paradigm. I don't know. That's just where my head's at.
That's like where I've been at for a while too. I'm just like, no, I like on a personal level, like I just feel like just like kind of like burnt. Like there's a way that I feel like kind of burned because like I think everyone here knows that I was adopted, and just like spending my whole life with white people was extremely oppressive. And then just like I had this idea in my head. I'm like, I'm gonna find black people. I'm gonna like be in a community, and it's gonna be like a place that's gonna be like safe in a way. Like obviously we're all humans and we all have a lot of trauma, but like safe in the sense of just like we're going to be able to have some sort of safety like from racism within black communities, and like we're going to have some safety of like anti-blackness, and like finding black communities and just seeing like how like even within black communities like there's like a way that like black people can still be anti-black. There's a way that like black people are like, because we're so on edge about racism, we're constantly scrutinizing each other in a way that just actually makes things a lot harder for us a lot of the time. There's just like a lot of just bullshit where it's just like it's just fucked up. Or it's not just there's like good things too, but it's just really, really complicated even within black communities. And so, yeah, I don't know. And then I'm sure like that can be said for like so many different groups of people. There's like, things are complicated there too. And it really sucks, but yeah, that's where my mind's at a bit too.
I could probably bit on that. On the there's a few things, but I think on the communities oppressing themselves and the oppressed can become oppressors. Yeah, I mean, because I'm and also Asian as well. So, speaking of Asian diaspora as well as indigenous people, a lot of the people that are in power, disproportionately, there are more cops and military personnel per capita that are, if white, unfortunately here, and then white. The white people own almost everything, for the most part in Hawaii. But so it's like watching other people, other Hawaiians, kill their relatives, or the United States, which is illegally occupying Hawaii, obviously, and killing Iraqis and many kids. Oh, shout out to China also for doing something the United States has no intention of ever doing, which is starting to build peace around the world. So that's also a very important thing I want to kind of jump into, which is that I kind of said in the last book club, which is that Pedagogy the Press was written in Brazil. It's important. It was not necessarily written by somebody who is not the poorest person in Brazil either. But it's a the oppressed class is not the people in the United States globally, not the people in the West. And like I think just to kind of bring current events in, like I think we just saw United States. I don't know what people. I think at least a lot of people in the United States recognize that their entire country is a fraud and that all their government officials are a bunch of cold warring, imperialist, racist, anti-Asian dickheads, for lack of a better word. And they're also idiots who got shown up by a Singaporean TikTok representative in the United States. Period where the brief window of 200 years are a handful of, let's just say, psychopathic, life-weighed people from Europe, and this planet is over. The United States, as I said last time, is the reigning champion of those people to this day with its U.S. hegemony and primacy. So people in the United States, I think part of, kind of saying, like, why can't we get to this point of, like, loving each other? The United States will never allow you to love your oppressor or the people you're oppressing. It never wants you to. It has mastered the ways to prevent you from doing that. It is the highest, some people say, like, oh, white people, they say, oh, yeah, Black Lives Matter, participate in racism, right? Like, I think that's come up, right? There's philanthrocapitalism, performative everything, the most advanced forms of mass control. The reason why TikTok is being banned is because Chinese people, which is 1/5 of the Earth's population, in fact, has been the biggest economy historically, thousands of years, was the oppressed class, among others. The last century of humiliation, plus a Cold War or two, those people, the rest of the global majority, the 90% of this Earth, if Hawaiians included, because I'm not an American, despite your attempts, well, not you on this stream, but I mean, the United States, forceful attempts to eradicate Hawaiian culture, which is fundamentally communist and fundamentally LGBTQ+ accepting, despite the United States, pushing $27 million into Uganda, and then to instate anti-LGBTQ+ laws, and then sanctioning Uganda on the anti-LGBTQ+ laws that they shoved in there, just like you shoved homophobia into Hawaii, just like you shoved your fucking military bases into Hawaii. So the people in the United States, and I say this as somebody who is like, I'm like in between, because I am an oppressor and an oppressed. I went to a private $20,000 a year Ivy League feeder school. I've got to like spend the rest of my life undoing that psychic genocidal damage from my own brain. Part of that is about listening to the press, and the press is not just the people that are like inside the United States. It's not going to be a United States soon, not in any kind of way that anybody recognize it. Like I think Americans need to wake up, like need to listen to. I mean, I'm not saying you have to like do whatever the Communist Party of China says, but your government, recognizes that that the Chinese people, not just the Chinese people, the Russian people, you have to learn who the Russian people are if you don't know. Learn their history, like not from any Western textbook, Luna Oi's book, learn who a lot of people probably know who that is, but the era in which the West as a whole, Anglo, Franco, Spanish speaking peoples, sadly, even the ones that are not in Europe, that's all the Five Eyes, that's all of all of AUKUS, it's all of NATO, period in which as Kishore Mahbubani, another Singaporean and a very wise diplomat that has had to go between Kissinger and Clinton and the Chinese representatives, and he said, like, this is not going to go well for the West as you are being finished, as your supply chains are being cut off. This is the end of that period. So for your own sake, this is not really for the global. China is going to broker peace around the world and your imperialist wars. Speaking of oppression, that's the highest form of it, whether you like it or not. So it's really it is really for the benefit of the world, but mostly for the people in the West, in the United States, that is falling apart, that has a worse quality of life than China, Cuba, and Vietnam. Figure out how to listen to the people that you have been oppressing for the last centuries, of whatever skin color you are. If you are still identifying as an American, to think about why are you even, think about that, really think about that, learn the rest of the world's history from them, from your media, your so-called education system that you don't have, and that can help to and that is what I think in the end will allow progress finally to be made. I think, but it is like, as Gerald Horne, another black great historian, said, like, only progress has ever been made for people inside the United States of color is when there has been international action, simply trying to move within the empire. As I like to call it, like, this American exceptionalism of all colors and all genders. It is like playing laser tag in the Death Star's mall. You have to like link up with the actual rebellion. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'll stop going on.
No, I totally agree, though. I think reading history is probably like one of the most just enlightening things. Like just I mean, I have like so much more that I need to learn, but just learning about stuff that the U.S. has done, U.S. imperialism, just really puts things into context. It puts kind of everything into context, and I think probably one of the most important things is just try to like understand history, and I think the more you learn, the more you kind of realize the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, yeah, and it's like multifaceted too, and I don't know. I'm like a history nerd. Like, I just love to dig into the histories of struggles throughout the fucking world, and it sucks because there's no, in my understanding, there's never no like one easy answer to anything, especially just in relation to like geopolitics. Like, when, you mentioned earlier about like just the spook, like the jumping into the international struggle. I mean, that just, like, I want that. I've been wanting that for 10 years, and it's, I don't feel, what's the word? I'm not like disparaged or like depressed about it, but I am like, part of me is somewhat discouraged, especially coming from like the American like diaspora or other, like, just like the because I do all my majority of my work here in the United States, like the general radical mindset in people in the United States is very concerning, and sometimes I don't want them to organize with people in Mexico. Sometimes I don't want to introduce like leftists here to people, like my other connections and across the sea, and I'm just like, no, like, y'all are still on this stupid ass like big-headed like American-centered idiocy that you have no capacity to relate to anybody because you're just so caught up in your own little fucking Americanized leftist bubble and shit. Like, can't get over your dumb self. Like, stick your head out of your ass. I don't know. I'm having these issues in regards to that. But like, but I still want, like, yeah, I mean, I've had American leftists get mad at me because like I'm studying exactly that. Like, I'm studying like, what went down in Russia, what's going down in like northern Iraq, what's happening in fucking Vietnam, and they're just like, what does that matter? What does that got to do with anything that's going on here? And it's just like everything, honestly, if you kind of think about it. Like, I want to know from different struggles. I want to know what happened in China. I want to know what happened, but like people have literally like just been like, that's not indigenous struggle. That's not. I'm just like, it is. Like, I don't know how to explain. It's not our indigenous struggle, but it's like an indigenous struggle somewhere. And anyway, like, I'm having issues with that right now. But like, I guess and that again goes to like dehumanization and going back to like what like Freire was talking about with within the struggle. Like, there is a dance with like potentially becoming the oppressor yourself. potentially being the one to put your needs above everyone else's, or your perceived community's needs above everyone else's, and that in turn creates oppression. And it's just something that I am just highly skeptical of, highly like paranoid of, highly just like, I don't want that. I don't want to be the, yeah. And the one passage that I really liked was like when they're talking about when in the hacienda where they took over, um what was it, the landlord or the business, the boss's operation, and then they kidnapped the boss and held him hostage. And he mentioned in the book, no one wanted to be a guard, nobody wanted to stand guard, because that forces you to look at your own capacity to oppress and to humanize. And you don't like that power is very tempting and very corrupting. I think some people recognize there's an element there that's you know, it's just an interesting in regards to the, I don't know, exploration of struggle and humanity. Like, I mean, I've been put in those positions where I've had to actually oppress others in creating safe spaces for queer people, and that's not a great feeling. Like, because sometimes it's not even like my oppressors per se, it's another poor person who is, you know, reactionary. More often than not, it's another poor person, it's another oppressed person being reactionary. And those are elements that we have to, like, in leftist circles, we really have to contend, we have to like face down, is that there's other oppressed people that absolutely do not fuck with the so-called queer agenda, do not fuck with like emancipation of Black people, you know, that do not, there's just you know what I mean? Like, I think of like the Dominican Republic, and I think of places like Haiti and Jamaica. I think of places like some parts of Mexico. Like, some parts of Mexico are super queer as fuck and all day, all night, and other parts of Mexico are just like, you'll get kidnapped and treated like shit for being a queer person or a Black person. And those are the elements that really, I don't know, keep me up at night, in regards to oppression, dehumanization, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like I guess for me, I'm thinking of like, I don't know that if this ties in at all, but like just when I'm thinking about like the way that like my experiences where like Black people can like perpetuate like harm towards each other, like just thinking about like, I don't know, it just like really sucks when you like see meet in a, I think like everyone just like has so much trauma, and we're all growing up in these fucked up systems that like any one of us can very easily like oppress one another like at any given moment. And it keeps me up at nights. I don't know, and like in a ruminatory way, like it kind of like keeps me up, because I think it like is frustrating, because like things don't have to be, I keep on thinking like things don't have to be this complicated, but they are. But yeah, I don't know, it is like just really frustrating that like that like we can't kind of just like make this line of like, we want to have a plurality of ideas, but those ideas cannot entail oppression. And if we could, but yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of just, I don't really know if I'm really going anywhere with that. I just find it really heartbreaking and stressful.
Something that comes to mind about this, like, for me, is again kind of related to that quote about like seeing yourself in the oppressed. I was going on my walk around the park the other day and listening to the book, and is actually just in the foreword. It's not the actual book, but he was talking about like how he's talking about, I don't know if you all have the same forward, but he's talking about like semi-humans, like how people who enact oppression have to like disengage from their own humanity to the point where they can't feel empathy for those that they oppress. And something that's something that I think is like, that's a particular aspect that I think like is important to understand, and something that like I keep seeing, like, to be an oppressor, like you have to like practice like disengaging from your own humanity. Like you have to disregard your own humanity to actively proactively disregard somebody else's, or prevent them from accessing their humanity in some way. And something like my heart sank, and also was like, yes, I've been saying this, and I also like another feeling happened where I'm like, I know what that's like, and I thought that was interesting. Like it was kind of fleeting, and I didn't want to really like embrace that, but it occurred to me like, I have to see myself in the oppressed, and I have to recognize the ways that the hegemony affects me, and understand those ways and find ways to like live my life and be as okay as I can be, and not just for me, but I have to see like really be part of the struggle as much as I can. But I also have to like see when the oppressor lives in me, and when see the, I don't know, it's different, but there's something to that, of like seeing when seeing the oppressor in yourself too, and that's so scary. Like I even feel like even just saying that, like oh well, all my leftist friends are gonna hate me now, but I'm like, well, this is just real. Like I think this is just, and we all have these ideas just like foisted on us all the time by people who are trying so hard to like kill their own intuitive, empathetic notions, to keep us all alienated from our own needs and our own humanity and each other. And it's like we're always, not only are we fighting that, but we're fighting that within ourselves. And that, I don't know, that notion brings me a lot of pain and anger and resentment. It's like, like not only gotta survive and fight capitalism, but now I've gotta like realize, how I'm part of the problem. Great, and it's like, it just exponentially makes it worse, but I think it's, I don't know, for me, coming to terms with that has been an eye-opening thing, and like an important part of the work. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's really reflected in like the when Freire brings up the like the fear of freedom, and I think a lot of what you were saying can be seen in like the fear of like the oppressor fears freedom because it strips them of their their ability to oppress, that strips them of that position of power. And I don't because of the nature of hegemony, that's not even always like or often is not a conscious thing. It's but yeah, that's something that resonated with me a lot too, realizing a lot of the just the ideas that I was brought up with, just because of my my identity or my place in society, though. The ways that even just unthinkingly, I can sort of play into or like reify that oppression.
Yeah, I think we all have a lot of trauma, and we all grew up in a really messed up society, and so we're gonna have like all these beliefs, and like there's gonna be like, all these ways we're gonna hurt each other, and we're definitely going to hurt each other. There's like kind of no way around it. Like part of it is just being human, and part of it is also like how messed up our society is. But I think for me, it's not so much that people hurt me. I think it's like, for me, like what really messes me up is like when I can't talk about it with people. Like when someone has hurt me and I'm like, hey, like this hurt, can we try to work through it? And then people are just like, well, I didn't mean to, so it doesn't matter. Or just like kind of like all like the dismissive responses that people can have of just like, well, of just, I think for me, like when I think about like racism, for example, like almost all my racist experiences like weren't intentional. They were people who really didn't think of themselves as being racist. They didn't mean to. They were saying something really hurtful, but they didn't intend to be racist. And I think for me, it's like, okay, like white people are going to say something racist, and that's kind of like how life is at the moment. And the main thing for me is like, but can we talk about it? And a lot of people can't. Like you try to bring it up and their world just falls apart and they lash out. And I think for me, it's like, well, if we can at least talk about it and work through it, I think things can be okay. And I think in general, I mean, this doesn't have to be how everyone has to feel, but for me, like in general, like if I can talk through things with people, like I think we're going to be okay. But a lot of times people can't. But I think that's kind of how I feel about like when I think of myself also hurting people, because there's ways that I hurt people all the time. Like just hopefully someone has enough patience with me to talk with me through it, but they also might not, and that's also completely fair if no one has that energy either. But I guess for me, I'm like, well, we're all going to hurt people, and that's a given. So I don't actually necessarily feel bad about it, although of course I want to like minimize the harm I do to people, if that makes sense.
There's this way that I don't know, this concept that a therapist was talking about of the like internalized or the internal colonizer, right? And that entity is going to discourage you from even asking for help in a lot of cases where you really need it. And it makes it a painful process to see yourself as not being able to survive in this hyper individualistic way, I think. And so even asking to talk about something that really hurt you is kind of a radical act in society, I think. And I think like another radical act is like even how do I say this, like recognizing that when you don't want to burden somebody by putting out something that might be disturbing or hard for them to handle in regards to you, that is also sort of this voice of the internal colonizer, right? And it's like, well, I should be able to handle this on my own, or I should be able to do this thing. And I think like throughout this book and kind of everything in my mind about what Preet is saying, it's like, well, you have to build these like relational networks, and it's not going to work the way you think it is, because it's not about you thinking it's going to work a certain way and then doing it. It's about this manifestation of the relationships between a group of people, and then that's where the education happens. It's in those relationships. I think obviously the liberation too, I think is wrapped up in those relationships. But yeah, it's so hard to even ask for help in this culture. Like, that's like, oh, well, you should be able to deal with that on your own. You know, we're all strong, right?
Yeah, even like saying that you need to talk about something is intimidating, because like I've had the experience of like being like, okay, like I have a need, I need to bring this up, and then the person just like completely lashes out at you. And so it's like even gauging like, is this a safe person to bring this up with, you know, is really hard. And even if they are, you have your past trauma of people lashing out at you when you're trying to communicate about something. And so all that stuff is just extremely complicated. Also, I've realized like we're going over time. We usually have book club for like about an hour, but there was just so much in this chapter to talk about. I think, I don't know how everyone's feeling, but like I'm thinking of like maybe starting to wrap up, just because I know people probably have some stuff to get to. One thing I wanted to like mention is that he talks about the oppressed, and how like he talks about how like the oppressed have to free themselves, and that will free everyone. And that's quite the burden, but it makes me so angry, because like when I think about white supremacy, I'm like, well, I didn't create white supremacy, white people did, but it is up to non-white people to dismantle it, unfortunately. But another thing is like he talks about like working with the oppressed. Like he talks about the people who try to help the oppressed, and how like a lot of times people will think that transformation is going to come through them, but it's actually going to come through the oppressed. And like he talks about like there's a quote somewhere in here saying like a good humanist. Actually, let me just find this. I know we're going over time. Command Control F, humanist. Oh, there we go. I had just seen it. A real humanist can be identified more by his trust in the people which engages him in their struggle than by 1,000 accusations to their favor without that trust. So I just think, I love that he really stresses that you need to have trust in the people. I think and this is something that maybe I wish we talked a little bit more about, but he talks about like charity, and he talks about false charity constrains the fearful and subdued, the rejects of life to extend their trembling hands. So it's disempowering. And then true generosity lies in striving so that these hands, whether of individuals or entire peoples, need to be extended less and less in supplication, so that more and more they become human hands which work and working transform the world. This lesson and the apprenticeship must come, however, from the oppressed themselves and from those who are truly solidary with them. So I kind of think it as like charity is disempowering, one is empowering. And so like giving people, I don't know, like Tovio's talks about how like poor people need resources. They don't need like a program or something like that, or something that they're like continually dependent on. People just like need resources and be able to trust people to know what they need to do with those resources. I just kind of think of like when people infantilize people, which just feels like really familiar to me, especially like with on the left, like the way that people want to hear about racism through white people because they trust white people more to be able to speak correctly about it than from non-white people, and all that stuff. It's just so infantilizing. And yeah, that's kind of the last thing I wanted to like really drive home. Does anyone have anything to add to that, to those points? Or does anyone have anything else they want to add before we just wrap up for the day?
Oh, I just thinking about like charity, like the there's always that, I think, in the oppressor, or more just the classes that have the wealth, have, you know, the oppressor classes, let's say, there's always this struggle with the idea of help. And they're always thinking about help and how they help people. And help is like one of the great weapons, right? That is like one of the great, like, you know, it's a sword that looks like a feather, you know what I mean? And people, you know, people have used that, I don't know, like, you know, going back to white man's burden and prior, and oh, what good the European, like, colonization efforts were, because it brought, like, oh, you know, it may have harmed millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people, but at least now we can send T-shirts that people don't want in the U.S. to undermine the textile industry in the global South. You know what I mean? And that's all helping, right? It's all charity.
Yeah,
and it's charity is criminal on that level.
Yeah, and it's like disempowering because then people are just like dependent on just donating all these clothes that people don't want, and then it like just gets rid of their actual textile industry there and the potential jobs there. That's kind of what bothered me with them. If anyone remembers Tom's, those shoes where it's like you buy a pair and then it gives a pair, but then like people who make shoes in those areas are like put out of business. So it just like ends up creating a problem, and just, I don't know, I think it's important to help people in a way where we're working with them, like always with them, never above them, if that's, I don't know, I think that's like definitely the goal. And does anyone have any?
Yeah, I mean, I could add on to that. Like, that's actually, I had a discussion with some a group of friends recently about that, and how I'm like really frustrated with like the current American ethos in regards to leftism. There's a lot of things to be frustrated about. But two things that this book, I mean, what y'all have highlighted, particularly with like charity, I mean, I see that amongst leftist circles too, like in the online spaces with like GoFundMes and like what's generally called like mutual aid, which I think is an absolute fucking farce. Like, I believe in mutual aid, but I don't, what Americans or just generally people in Western society consider mutual aid is not mutual aid.
It's just charity.
Like,
they just call charity mutual
charity.
aid.
It's exactly. It's like, I'm like, why are you guys complaining charity with mutual aid? Stop doing that. It's pissing me
nothing mutual about it.
It's pissing me off. Because exactly, there's nothing mutual about it. And I was having this conversation with my friends about it because I've been a recipient of that, right? I've received over $1,000 in so-called mutual aid, and like, it's like cool. I there's this. It's like, receive, what is it, pass it forward, kind of this technique. But like, really, I also know people that subsist off of that shit, and I'm like, there's also just nothing mutual about that. Like, there's no. You guys aren't in the struggle together, and you guys are not in like building a relationship. There's no like connection there that is radical at all beyond just like a white person being like, here, have money, person of color, like, here's my reparations. And then the white person getting to just be like, yay, I'm not an oppressor anymore. Like, it's like, no, there's no relationship there. It's just, you're just absolving yourself of guilt. Sorry. Not sorry, but, anyways, on top, so I want to see real, like, mutual, but regardless of that, like, on top of that, there's also this other notion. I mean, things are getting a little things have always been getting hectic in the United States, and it comes and goes, the waves of like anger and issues. But like, with the all of these laws being passed very recently in regards to like trans rights, queer issues, there's a lot of discussions. A lot of emotions are flaring, and for better and for worse. I mean, yeah, there's always another side of the coin. But I guess one thing I'm tripping on is again, like, sense of like dehumanization. And like, I don't know, I have this stance personally, like sometimes I can be very callous in regards to human life, and regarding people that are like hurting people that I care about. Like, I just like, to me, I recognize an oppressor. I recognize like a valid danger or a threat, and I mean, like, empathy leaves my body, and I just see like a creature that I must alienate one way or another, and a force that needs to be excised. But like, this discussion, I don't know, I've been hearing a lot of interesting discussions and a lot of people bringing up, violence as a means to an end. And someone who grew up with a very violent life, I'm also kind of just skeptical of that, especially for the American ethos and conceptualization of violence. it's just like a part of me is like, I'm just what's the word? I'm just paranoid that people just don't necessarily understand that they're just becoming what they hate the most without even recognizing it. And I'm not, all that saying, I'm not a non-violent person. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a non-violent person, but I'm also just terrified of people not having an understanding that like commitment to violence will forever scar you, even if you don't like, even if it doesn't, like, even if you're not physically maimed, you know what I mean? Like, it's an emotional scar that you're gonna have to wear for the rest of your life, and that might actually just like break your brain. It might actually just like turn you into you might turn you into a cop, and you will not even recognize it. So I don't know. Like, I just been hearing a lot of these discussions recently around me, and like I said, I'm not a nonviolent person, but
Yeah, can you give an example?
I'm also, well, like, like, I think the best example, you know, people are talking about like, oh, we need to start building a military. You know, I've heard people like, we need to start like, and I'm just like, you're not nowhere near that capacity. You guys barely know how to get past a fucking argument. Y'all have an argument and can't talk to each other for fucking months on end. You think you're gonna build an army? You stupid fuck. Like, I don't know, like, like, you know, people say something offensive to people, and like, and then they're just like, that's my enemy forever. And these are two leftists, you know what I mean? Like leftists infighting, yet like leftists want to bring up the concept of like actually shooting somebody. And I'm just like, y'all don't even know how to deal with inner conflicts within like your own circle. And organizations dissolve so easily when you introduce notions of like hurt and harm, sexual abuse or otherwise. Sometimes it's not even that extreme. Sometimes it's just like uh someone acting overly aggressive, like an overly aggressive black woman or like a poor person, like, and they're just like, that person's problematic. They cannot like, or they cannot organize with us because they're problematic in this leftist space. And it's just like, but then the same people want to talk about committing violence. And I'm like, y'all are not disciplined enough or just emotionally mature enough. I'm sorry. And I could see those same people, those same leftists turn into tyrants. I've seen them do it in emotional spaces. When we're talking about social hierarchies, I've seen those same leftists turn into tyrants and weaponize fragility, weaponize like whiteness, weaponize identity politics. It's so I don't know. I'm just like in the American ethos, like I'm seeing people turn into the oppressors, even amongst leftist spaces, and I wish they would read like a bit more like Freire, like kind of more like just have a greater understanding of like dehumanization and the dance we the role we play within that dance in struggle.
Yeah, and I think I know what you're talking about. Just like the way that people can use leftism to like beat each other over the head with it, like rather than like you would think that like we care about like ableism and racism and all these things so we can liberate ourselves, but it kind of has been disturbing for me to see like the way that those things are become a tool to kind of like beat people over the head with. And then yeah, there's like something like, I think that's why, like, I don't know if you were here for this, but like when I was saying like the idea like should and should not, that's something that I've been deconstructing because I find it to be like a serious problem of like, we all come from really different backgrounds. We're all really broken, and that's our premise. That's where we're starting off. And so like we need to like be able to make space for each other. We need to be able to make space for not always being perfect. And at the same time, you don't want to allow people in who are going to be like systemically harmful. But I think I've seen like a lot of just like beating people over the head with these tools that we're supposed to have to free ourselves, and how that can be tyrannical. No, I get what you mean. We shouldn't necessarily be talking about like a lot of people aren't necessarily equipped to be talking about violence at this stage.
And that's like, for me, it's kind of offensive for me, for someone that grew up with a lot of violence. Someone that I still have to deal with a lot of, like, I still have I'm a wanted man in certain parts of this country. Like, people will kill me if they see me, right? And because of my upbringing, how I grew up, what I did when I was a child, and or like a teenager or whatever. But like, so I have to like live with that. And it's just like when particular people talk about violence, it kind of, it feels offensive to me. But not just that, it's like this is not where our priority should be. I get it, people are upset, and I get it, we want to like take revenge, we want to have but from growing up in a gang culture, like, all I see is violence perpetuates violence. And it's also, when you commit violence, you're not the only, you and the other party are not the only person that are going to be affected by that. Say, like, if people can't reach you, they will find whoever the fuck you love. Everyone is going to be affected. It's not just you. When you commit to engage in violence, you're bringing you and everyone with you along for the ride, as well as the other. And whatever grubby little interests might be watching on the sidelines, just waiting to exploit that situation, that's another factor. Anyways, so for me, the solution isn't violence, and like I said, I'm not a non-violent person. I will fuck people up. Like, I've been there, done that, and we'll do it again if I see no other options. But like, for me, the priority of radical spaces is creating humanity, creating more humanity, creating greater spaces of understanding, and stronger connections and bonds that exist beyond, like, what do you call that? Trauma bonding. I mean, like, that happens in certain conflict spaces and shit. I mean, you will see I have literally, like, seen anti-fascists and fascists bond over trauma because they were in a war zone. So, as insane and as innocuous, and like, some communists were just like, that's not real. That fucker was not that dude's not a communist. Then it's like, you've never lived a war, motherfucker. I'm sorry. You've never been in a war zone. Like, there's certain things of the human psyche that you just will never understand unless it's sat with violence in that regard. Like, have it at your doorstep. That's no longer there because it was blown the fuck up. Anyways, so with that said, like, within the Western context, it's like, we need to have, the element of alienation is so extreme. That is our greatest enemy, is our capacity to alienate ourselves and others, because that's a culture that we grew up in. We grew up in an alienation culture, and we had to combat that at every turn and extreme. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do we? That's just me. Like, and violence just inherently is alienation. I mean, it's, to me, there's nothing more American than violence. Violence is more American than apple pie, is the saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I know we're kind of, I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think the response should be to, like, the militarization of the right? Because I think I'm really vibing with what you're saying, and then also, like, if they're getting, I feel very on edge knowing that they're getting armed and also trying to make their own military.
Yeah, I mean, I'm strapped. I got my little, it's not the answer. It's like, I'm prepared for that. You know what I mean? I'm prepared to retort. I'm prepared to respond. I mean, like, I train in firearms. I don't know, like I said, I'm not a nonviolent. So, like, that to me is important. I think, me personally speaking, I think everybody should know how to use a firearm. Like, I train my people, like, friends who are like, who are handicapped and disabled and not even them. I'm like, for them, those, like we go out and to the range and stuff, but like they're gonna be, because they're homogeny, they're gonna be a lot stronger than us no matter what. Honestly speaking, like the only thing we have over them is that they're fucking fearful and we're they exist in fear. And for us, like our love is stronger than anything they'll ever had. That's just my personal take.
Could be, right?
Yeah. But like, and I mean, honestly, a lot of the rights, they're cowards, and they also turn on each other. They fall apart just as any other leftist organization. They turn on each other because like there's so many disgusting people in that group. Like just do also beyond just doing leftist uprisings, do some history on some right wing uprisings. You'll see some horribly idiotic, disgusting, and hilarious shit. They're terrifying people. Don't get me wrong. People who live in fear are dangerous, but they live in fear, so they like turn on each other over hardly anything sometimes. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, like I'm not gonna allow some fucking fascist to just come knocking down on my door just because he's armed. Like I will respond in kind, but that's not my prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna go. My priority is not to target like this.
So you want to put like
group.
all your energy, like you're ready if it happens, but you want to put your energy into like building community and not being so isolated and hyper individualistic.
Exactly, big time.
Yeah,
that's it. That's bullet point.
When I try to attempt things in person and in real life, I feel like I run into a lot of people who consider themselves leftists, but are hard to take seriously because it feels like they are playing role playing rather than trying to do it. Well, like an example is someone who said, "We are going to war." Meanwhile, it's a group of literally 20 people. So I don't know. I feel like when people are so fixated on violence rather than viewing it as a tool that has a place and time, they aren't being serious. They're playing rather than really considering what needs to be done in the situation. I don't know.
If I could just jump, I mean, we're kind of over time, but I was thinking like, oh yeah, it is the most American thing is violence, and that's what they do around the world is they just throw gasoline on all the fires and they make a lot of money. So, if you're pushing, that's what they're doing in Ukraine by overthrowing the country, installing a Nazi coup, and then giving all the Nazis in the world all the money and all the guns that they want, and they're getting denazified by Russians. So, I guess Russia will come denazify the United States at some point. Hopefully that's not where it's going to come to, but that's kind of an important thing that people are. In the United States, it is a very bad place. It's a bad position. In Europe, in Canada, got a lot of people that are very educated, very well conditioned, and you have to do what you have to do to defend yourself. But it is, if you focus only on violence, like the end, that's not good. Like that's not going to build a lasting. A better society, I think. So like in Hawaii, just as an example, there are some people who are like, oh, we should just fight the U.S. military. It's like, well, we have the Indo-Pacific Command here. Literally, majority of the world nexus of empire is commanded Vietnam, Iraq, Korea, you name it, right? They have all the drones, all the bombs. They dropped 15,000 pounds of C4 equivalent from the B-52 Stratofortress on Mauna Kea while we were there. So we were like, we should go fight them. And it's like you don't understand how struggle functions. I mean, because I said there's a lot of unfortunately brainwashed Native Hawaiians. Like my parents, and unfortunately they believe that they're white Christian people despite being Native Hawaiian and more Asian and Native Hawaiian than anything else. But still, we understood that like this struggle in this time requires this nonviolent action of like 6 months of direct nonviolent resistance, getting arrested by Hawaii's biggest police and military action that involved Black Hawk copters. It involved literal U.S. military aircraft bombing all over the place next to us. Most of the United States didn't hear about that, but there was a point where they were trying to trigger a violent response from the Native Hawaiian community because then they could just kill us or just throw us all in prison. But enough of our people. We had like several 100,000. It's about 10 to 20% of the population. Right? As I said, Hawaii is more like Bolivia. It's not like the United States, because the United States is 98% American, white and or non-white American identifying people. Bolivia is 60% indigenous. Hawaii is about 60% Hawaiian or part Hawaiian, and about 75% non-white. So it's a different material reality. But long story short, we had to really be disciplined. Like echoing what some of the other concerns. You don't have an educated. So number one, it's education. Like, another one was like, I don't want to organize with anybody around the world with these people in the United States. You have to do you gotta do your best to educate the people in your place that you are. And if they are diseducated, the United States collapses and it becomes a failed balkanized state of Ron DeSantis's Nazi army in the southeast. And the new secessionist America One in the West Coast, run by Silicon Valley neo-feudalism, and then you have the DC Wall Street old guard of the new 13 colonies. Hope that's not gets very ugly, but the truth is the United States is losing all its colonies faster. It's all of its banks are exploding. This is not a thing that's just a little urgent. I'm not trying to scare people, but the United States will go through a very difficult time that it has never ever gone through. The West as a whole is going through a multi-century process, and I don't believe the United States will have a quote unquote action that makes a revolutionary anything. It's not going to have that. The people are not prepared for that. You know that. You're there, right? I see them. You see them. We all see them. You have to save whoever you can save, so that the Federation of Anishinaabe, Sioux, and Lakota indigenous peoples, or whatever, I don't know, I'm not going to say what comes after it. You have to organize the people you can organize with, and it is true that you have to keep out the people that are not capable of even getting to the point of being in radical solidarity with everybody in your group on all the axes that we're talking about. Because it doesn't sound fun, but you have to be realistic about that. And the Belt and Road Initiative that comes through North Turtle Island, the only thing I believe will ever build, Paulo Freire was talking about, will ever build the kind of community. The United States is not going to do anything for you. The United States is actively killing you. In fact, the Chinese government is more of a friend to the United States than Americans. If they wanted to get rid of you, they would have just cut off all the medical and all your Walmart and all your everything, because you haven't been sending anything back to them. The Chinese are very patient and generous people. The rest of the world is very patient and generous with Americans. It's the thing that this is another one of the hubris of the United States. I think that they're doing so well. The rest of the world cares. The Chinese care about you so much. They keep sending you vast quantity of all the products that you require to exist. They could have terminated the United States if they just let all of the entire Western financial system collapse in 08, 09. I know that because I didn't work at a giant Goldman Sachs bank, but I almost did. And I was like, yep. And the Chinese were like, we care too much about the average American. Let you all suffer so terribly and so violently, so fast. And, anyway. So I think that so in Hawaii, we're trying to build economic sovereignty. We're trying to get as educated and connected internationally. So we're talking about why isn't Hawaii in the Belt and Road Initiative? Why aren't we building win-win mutual cooperation rather than fighting in all of these ridiculous, needless, hyper-violent? You talk about violence. We're talking about the biggest violence, right? We're talking about blowing everyone up around the world in an eternal downward spiraling, climate catastrophe-fueled water wars, right? I, as a native Hawaiian, I am not going to participate in this, and more of us are saying we are not going to participate in this. We are going to rapidly. We're working on cloud computing, AI-based, solar solutions, internal economics. This tourism. If you fucking come to Hawaii, I hate you, okay? Because the United States runs our tourism industry, and it is part of our imperialist process. When we are like Cuba, then you can come. All the money will go to support the socialist, sovereign country of Hawaii. That money is going back into our housing, our health, and everything else. As it stands, you're powering the U.S. military's occupation of us. So that's where people got to start to, I think people got to start moving in that direction and just accept that many of the people in your community, sadly, will, something will happen to them, let's just say. And it's going to be hard. My parents, I accept that my parents will never be you're gonna tell me that, Chris, stop being a crazy Hawaiian, like die till they die, you know? And okay, well, I guess you're gonna not be part of this. And they're also the 70s, so my kids are more important than changing their mind, I think, you know? And so anyway, but I know we're like way over time, so.
You know, it's like really hard when your parents, yeah, just knowing everything that your parents faced and that they can't see that. It's really tough. Yeah, I think does anyone else have anything to add? And if not, we're gonna just wrap up for the day. Okay.
Now that we're over time, I have all kinds of things that I want to say, but I'm just gonna let it rest.
Probably another one, you know.
Yeah, next time, the next chapter or whatever.
Yeah, the next chapter we're just gonna read.
I'll see y'all again, eh?
Yeah, we're gonna read chapter 2 for next time. It's a lot shorter. It's like just 20 pages. And then yeah, for book club time, I don't know. I had a lot of fun talking, but I know people have stuff to get to. I don't know. So this ended up being basically a couple hours long, but I guess we could. I don't really know how to divide up time. Like maybe just shoot for an hour and a half, and if we go over, I'll maybe like say people can get going because sometimes people feel awkward leaving because in the middle. I don't know. I'll try that for next time. Does that sound okay time-wise with everyone?
I think 90 minutes makes sense for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Oh, and then do you want to all just see each other on the... Oh, wait. I'm going to stop this stream really fast. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm going to...
Bye, the internet.
Bye, internet. Okay. I just didn't want to pull up my accidentally stream